So that was we're having some troubles with the sound, but we've got it up and running. So, hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Zulu's Painting Show, where we take you on a delightful journey of painting, where we learn you, oddly enough, how to paint. So last week we talked a lot about the paint kit we'll be using and the model we'll be painting. I've included a link to purchase the paint kit in the description because last time it wasn't there, but now it is, and that's exciting. So if this is something you're interested in diving into, the link is there for you to follow, as well as a link to the model that we'll be painting. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. I've done a little work on the lighting, so hopefully this will be a little easier to see. We've got our model that we started last week. This is the Orc riding a dire wolf. I very much enjoy this model. It's a good-looking sculpt. It has a lot of fun details on it, but not overwhelming as far as the things that we'll be working on. As a reminder, the paints that we'll be using for this one is our ultramarine blue. We've got a pure red. Oh my goodness. Demonic yellow with a lot of extra letters. We've got green skin, appropriately for our orc. We've got leather brown, matte white, matte black, barbarian flesh, which ironically we won't really be using. I might use it for a little bit for the wolf's ears. We've got our strong tone wash, and finally our plate mail metal. All of these paints, along with the starter brush, can all be found in the Army Painter starter set. The additional brushes we'll be using for this particular project is our, what's this guy called again? So we got our monster brush. We've got, of course, our dry brush. And then for once we start getting into more of the detailing, we've got our regiment brush. And then over here, hidden away, is our character brush. So those are all the tools that you'll be needing for this particular project. Things that are nice to have, I've got this little holder, but you can use a little glue tack and a paint pot. You will need a palette, but this can be even the plastic from the paint kit itself. You'll need water to rinse your brush. And then, of course, we're going to use some paper towels for drying the brush and also dry brushing, which we'll be diving into today because, well, dry brushing is a technique that is very, very helpful in a variety of ways. So, we're actually going to start with the dry brushing because we're going to be dry brushing our wolf's fur. Now, last week, we slapped on that coat of our leather brown, and then over top of that, used our strong tone to wash it all up. Now from that, we've gotten this nice sort of fur pattern, but we can make it better. We're going to add more layers of detail. When you're painting your miniatures, you've got your base layer, your wash, which will darken the recesses, and then your highlighting or dry brushing, which will lighten up the high points. We'll be doing some highlights today on our guy up here, but to start out with, we'll do some dry brushing on the fur because, let's be honest, if you were to go through and do every single hair, you better be doing that for a competition because that level of detail is, I mean, you do the detail that you want as much as you'd like, but we're gonna bang this out a little bit quicker because, you know, we don't need to be spending all of the time in the world on it. Now, the color that we used is this here leather brown, along with the wash. And the wash is darkened up a little bit, but in order to really get those highlights to pop, we're going to want to lighten up our brown just a little bit. So let's dive over to our palette here for a moment. So I'm going to grab our leather brown, give it a good vigorous shake. Sorry about that. I'll remember to mute the next time I do that. So we're going to go ahead and do a couple of drops. Oh, guess it doesn't really do drops right now. Do a little dollop of paint onto our palette. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our matte white. I'm going to mute this time while I shake. And we're back. And we're going to put just a little bit of white into our brown. Yeah. Put this guy back where it belongs. Now for this, we're going to go ahead and grab out our dry brush. We're just going to mix our colors up. And as you can see, just a little bit of that white will really lighten up your brown. Got a nice light brown. Now, as you're mixing with your brush, you're going to find that some of your colors are going to be on the upper parts of your bristles. So you're going to really make sure that you get all the paint sort of mixed in there. So as you can see, our brown is much lighter than our brown here. So we're going to really highlight the tips of those hairs. Now to dry brush, you've got to dry your brush off. So load your brush up with a little bit of paint, but kind of dab it off. Then you're going to come to your paper towel, and this is going to seem a little counterintuitive, but you're gonna get it so that there's not much brush left or paint left on your brush. You're just leaving just a little bit of the color on your napkin. You come to your model, and then just very lightly, you're going over the top of the raised edges, and you're just going to catch little bits with that lighter color. And it's just a very light dusting. And you can see already, if you look at this side versus this side, you're just bringing out the details in his fur, and you're gonna want to you do sort of quick directional. You want to try and go perpendicular to the hair, so the hair goes sort of up and down here like this. So I'm going across the hair to just grab the very tops of the hairs. Now I'm doing this as early on as I am because, as you can see, I'm making sort of a mess. And we're going to be diving into a little bit more sort of detailed stuff as we go on, and we don't want to get our dry brushing paint onto the more detail that we'll be doing. Move my mic a little bit so that it's not in my elbow. So yeah, as you can see already, that those hair details are really starting to come out. You can just really see all those individual hairs, and it really pops a lot of the detail on it. And that same thing is going to be true of the hair on his head. We'll be using some dry brushing on that, but it's going to be a slightly different color. So, and if you'll notice, I haven't reapplied onto my brush. You really want to make sure your brush doesn't have a lot of paint on it, because you can really go a long ways with just a little. It's always easier to put more on than take stuff off. So, you know, make sure that your brush isn't too loaded with paint. Now I'm going to go ahead and reload a little because I want a little bit more. We're getting a little too little there on him. So, and again, you make sure that brush is almost entirely clean. So as you sort of pull it along your napkin or your paper towel, you should see almost no color coming off. That way you can really control how much color you're putting onto the model. And then again, you're doing sort of grazing strokes. You don't want to really push the brush in there, because again, you're really trying to just hit the edges and the high points. If you're thinking of this model sort of as a topographical map, you're trying to all the peaks are going to get hit with your dry brush. All the valleys are going to get hit with your wash. And again, because we haven't started really on the color of the rider, we can really be confident that we're not gonna mess up his color. And you want to always try to start kind of at the high parts and then move your way down, because again, with shadow and light, you're gonna have those high the light is gonna hit things more from the top than it does from the bottom, unless of course you want to do sort of a backlight thing. Interesting. So I saw that it looked like. Oh, here we go. Huh. Yeah. Our stream doesn't like it when you post links on there. What kind of things are What are you trying to post there on Twitch? We'd love to hear about it. Oh. Hmm. All right. So. Oh dear. There seems to be a bot in our Steam chat, so our bot seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing. Excellent. All right. So there we go. We've done a very quick dry brush. This combined with our base coat and our wash have really given us a lot of detail on that wolf. And what's really nice is you can really see the hairs, and you can really see the detail of it. And we've spent relatively little time getting this guy to a really good tabletop look. Now, I feel like we should finish off the wolf before we dive into the rider, because there's only a couple small details, and we can really just finish him up. So we're going to dry off our dry brush. We'll come back to dry brushing a little bit later, but for now, I think this is probably a really good level of paint for him. So I'm going to go ahead and dry this guy off. And don't be shy when it comes to, you just got to really get it nice and cleaned out. You don't want any paint being left in your bristles. You want to really make sure it's nice and clean. So, and we're also dry brushing with a slightly wet brush is going to muddy the thing. So you really want to make sure this dry brush is dry. So if you're wanting to change color, make sure that you have some time in between there to let this guy really dry out. If you ever want to feel if there is any sort of wetness on your brush, this part of your hand generally has a pretty good you can feel a lot right there. So you just sort of, if you drag it along there, especially along the edges, you can feel a little bit of sort of coolness or wetness on it. You're going to want to wait to use that guy till later. So we're going to set that up there, let it sit for a moment. We're then going to go ahead and switch to our regiment brush, and we're going to go ahead and dive into a couple things. So we've got some details I want to pull out of this wolf, and it's mostly going to be in his face. The rest of his body looks good. He's really good the way he is, but we've got a couple things that I want to bring out a little bit. We've got the insides of his ears here. I want to add a little color to. We've got his teeth and then his eyes. So let's go ahead and start with. Let's go ahead and start with those ears. We're gonna just add a little bit of color, a little bit of interest. Plus, we've got this here. This flesh tone, so I figured let's go ahead and give it a go. So I'm going to mute for a sec so I don't blow your ears out with shaking. All right, and we're back. So let's go ahead and just put a little bit. Oh, some loose paint on my palette here. Just put a little dollop here, because we're not going to be using a lot. We're just putting a little bit onto the ears, just to add a little bit more personality to this wolf, make him kind of interesting. I don't want him to take away from our main character, the rider, but I also don't want him to feel like he's been neglected. A little bit of detail can really just bring that up. So we're going to go ahead and, like I said, we're going to be using our regiment brush. Now, it's not the smallest brush I have, but for the details I'm wanting to put on this guy, I think it'll work very nicely. So, again, don't forget, you're going to wet your brush a little bit. Now, I actually just recently saw a thing that says you want to wet your brush to make sure that the first thing that goes into that sort of deep spot in your brush isn't the paint, but rather is water to keep that spot nice and clean. We're adding some water into our paint to thin it out a little bit. Now, I noticed that the Army Painter paints are actually pretty thin already, but it's a good practice to get into to make sure that you're getting the sort of the color that you want. And again, your palette is your place where you're testing these paints out. So I can still see a little bit of the white of the palette coming up through my brush, but it's not too thin, it's not too thick, it's just about right. Which of course is something that unfortunately will take some practice. Always err on the side of less is better. Now, we're diving into a spot. It's this little recess here. I've got a lot of areas around here, and I might hit it, but that's okay, because we've still got our brown, so if we need to clean it up, we can. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit of pink in that ear. Just gonna, yeah. So we've gotten a little on the edges, but that's okay. We're gonna clean that up. And also, it's kind of a thin layer, so we're gonna probably need to put two coats on there to really make it look sort of fleshy. But again, that's okay. That's why we're doing this. Little strokes, just controlled brush movements. And if you ever find that your brush is sort of your tip is opening up a little bit, go ahead and just go back to your palette, and you're going to want to spin the tip on your palette, and it'll really sort of point that back up for you. And that sharp point is really going to be what helps you get into those hard to reach spots. All right. So there's our first coat there. We're going to come back here, so it's dried a little bit. You don't want to try and put your second coat on before your paint has at least somewhat dried, otherwise you'll just be pushing the paint around and you're not going to get the effect that you're looking for. So we're going to come back in, do a little bit extra. There we go. Yeah. Now again, you might be thinking to yourself, now Rob, that's a real messy paint job you've done. How you've got flesh on your fur bits, and I absolutely agree with you. I have, but that's okay. This is a great example of what you can do. You just got to clean it up your stuff a little bit. So we'll come back to that. Don't you worry. But first, I'm gonna do the other ear. Do the second coat on that other ear, so we can really lock in that nice. Oh, see, got it right there, and that's okay. That is okay. I feel like in many ways Bob Ross should always be the patron saint of painting. You know, he understands that mistakes are made sometimes, but don't think of them as mistakes. Think of them as happy little accidents. All right, so we got that paint in there. It's a little messy. It's a little all over the place. We got it in, and now we're gonna clean it up, make it a little bit better, because yeah, it's the more I'm touching this, the worse I'm making it, but that's okay. So I'm gonna clean our brush off, get it nice and clean, dry the brush off. Remember, again, you can use the inside. Oh, my hand where it belongs. You can use this crease in your hand there. You close your hand around it, hold the brush through while spinning it, and you'll point up that brush to keep it nice and tight. So next, since we did make a little bit of a mess, we're going to go back to our brown, but this time with our regiment brush. I'm going to go ahead and snake a little bit water because it's sort of started to... There we go. Starting to dry out on us. And then we're just going to, with the side of the brush, we're not going to try and use the tip. We're just going to kind of come along the edges here. We're just going to clean up those little spots where I hit. There. Just gonna brown up around the edges, and it's okay to have a little sort of extra along the edges of the ears here, because lightening up the fur right next to his ears kind of makes sense, you know? He'd have kind of lighter fur near his ears. And just like that, we've cleaned up those ears. A little bit of color to them, a little bit of character. That's just a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and continue down this road. We've got a couple colors on our palette, which is nice. That brown's going to be helpful in case we start making some other boo-boos here and there. And now that I've said that, I am very sorry that I used kid speak on you. Mistakes aren't the right word. Boo-boos seem too childish. We'll call them flubs. If you flub a little, that's okay. We're going to fix it. So he has these spines up on the top, and I have been sort of neglecting them. And he's also got his teeth. So the color we're going to use for both of those is going to be relatively similar. So we're going to go ahead and start with our white. Now, bones and teeth and things aren't white, but that's okay. We'll get to making it more of a color here in just a moment. So we're going to add just the tiniest bit of yellow to this. I don't want to do brown. You know, let's go ahead and let's do just a tiny bit of brown to make a nice sort of dusty color. There it is. Clean off my paint pots because they're kind of dribbly. So just a tiny drop of brown in our white. Mix this guy up, and we're going to use the back of the brush, so I don't fill my bristles with. So I don't fill my bristles with this paint. All right, see, look at that. Got ourselves a nice light color, a nice khaki. Oh goodness, a nice khaki color. Use that as our base color for our teeth and for the spikes on this guy's back. So again, gotta remember to get a little water, mix that in to thin out our paints, help it flow, help cover. Ooh, that's a nice color. Now, I am still using this somewhat larger brush because you don't need to have a tiny brush to do details like this. You can get away with quite a lot with even a brush as big as this one. And actually, our starter brush, I think, might be a really good size for doing the teeth. I'm going to switch over that guy here in a moment. Just doing the spikes. And I mean, I could have done the spikes with a much larger brush, but it would have taken much longer. So this just expedites this spike process, and it's just remembering to be sort of conscious of what you're doing as you get closer to the fur. But again, we've got that brown here still. So if we do have a little, we had the name for him and we lost it. If we do manage to get paint where we don't want it, we can always come back and fix it up. Now, if you notice, doing a couple of thin coats just to really make sure that it's nice and light. But again, you don't gotta go too crazy with it. Oh, looks like one of the spikes here is poking up between his legs. Make sure we don't forget about that guy. I have the feeling we'll be repainting this spike as we start to getting to him and his colors. All right, so we've gotten the back spikes. Ooh, and look at that little bit of white, that splash of white. I think really does a lot to add to the character of this wolf. Although we're losing some of the white in the background. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's so nice. And we'll be putting a wash on these to darken them up a little, add some character to it. But for the teeth, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our starter brush, because it has a nice sharp tip. You can really get in there, get those details. And again, just in the same way we were doing with the ears, with the teeth, you can really, if you screw up, don't gotta worry about it. You've got your light brown, so we can fix the guy. And actually, what I'm gonna do for the teeth is I'm just gonna put the our bone color in the whole of the mouth, and you might be noticing that we're losing a little bit of the detail of the teeth, and that's okay, because that's what washes are for. So we're going to get that nice light color in there. We're going to make sure to really bring out this this big old tooth he's got here. And then we're just going to get the rest of the teeth, make sure that they're good and painted. And this is definitely one of the times where you gotta make sure that you're not going too crazy on your amount of paint. Because if you slop too much in the teeth, it doesn't matter if you do end up putting a lot of wash on here. If you've sort of rounded the details, if you flatten the details with your paint, the wash can't save you. So make sure, you know, if you want to make sure that you haven't gone too overboard, just clean your brush off, and then you can just come in with just a clean brush, a little bit of water, sort of just make sure that the paint is is where you want it. And again, we're getting a little paint here and there, but we're going to fix that up. We're going to clean it. We're going to make it nice. Now, while we're here, and while we've got this nice sort of light color, now we want to do the eyes yellow. But in order to sort of help out with the yellow, and this isn't if you had a white on your palette, this would also be a good way to use it. But we're just going to go ahead and put just a little bit of that light color on the eyes. And they're not going to stay this color. This is just going to help us when we start putting the yellow on to lighten it up, so that we're trying to go from a very light to a lighter color instead of going from a darker color to a lighter color. And again, you can see where I've gotten more than just the eyeball. We're going to clean that up. We're going to clean that up. We're just going to get in there with our light color, so it's easier when we get to the yellow to do that. And I've given it some what's the makeup thing where you got your the eyes? Oh goodness, I've always forgotten what it's called. Anyway, so we've managed. We got our teeth. We got our first coat of the teeth. But let's go ahead and go back. Really lighten up those spikes. Really make sure that they're in a good color. This is always nice. As you might notice, I am using my water pot here as a brace for my hand. I've got this hand is sitting on my work surface. This hand is sitting here. And with that, my hands are significantly steadier. Really making sure that I've got a solid surface for my hands to be on. Just helps a lot. I don't know if you can hear the planes flying by, but they're definitely going by. Alright. I'm going to do a little bit more of our... Oh man. They're flying very low. Yeah, I'm definitely going to clean up those eyes. Do just a little bit more on the teeth. So, the reason I'm doing 2 layers on these is because you can still see a little bit of the brown sort of through our cream color that we've got. And for the spikes, that's mostly okay, but I really want to control sort of what color we're looking at here. So to do that, I've got to put a couple of thin layers on our wolf's teeth and back spikes. Alright, see, and just a little bit of work, we've really added a lot of detail and character to this wolf, which is just, it's very nice. Alright, so, let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and clean up some of the white that we've got in places. So we're going to go back to our brown. A little dollop of water just to kind of make sure that it's not getting too thick on us, because again we're going to be going into nice sharp details. So again, pull the brush along the palette, spin it as you do so, and you can really get those that nice nice sharp point. And yeah, you just come in here, and any of the white that we don't like where it is, we can just put that on there. And it narrows down his eyes, which is very fun. A little bit on the jaw there. Just clean up the jaw. I like showing this sort of thing because it really shows that you don't need to have 100% brush accuracy. You just got to be willing to go back and catch some places that you might have gone over a little extra. Now I got, ironically, I got a little extra brown on the jaw where I didn't want it. So you just clean out your brush, and then you can just sort of push the paint around while it's still drying. Make sure that all the colors are where you want them to be. I've told a lot of times when new painters are interested in getting started, they'll say, I don't know where to begin. And I understand that completely. It can be very intimidating. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of stuff in here. But the thing to remember is essentially you're just doing paint by numbers. You know, once you've figured out what colors you want where, you don't need to really worry about the shading and the highlights and things, because as you've seen so far in this model alone, so we've got our brown here. We did the brown, then we put a wash on it to darken it up for the spots that need to be dark, and then we lightened our paint with a little bit of white, and then we hit the high spots, and now ultimately it's brown, but with that nice depth of color. And that depth of color was achieved simply by taking our sort of knowledge of shadow and how that works, and moving it around. That I've put too much brown there. See, in my attempt to clean, I have muddied it. There we go. Yeah, and you'd be surprised what you can do with a somewhat wet brush tip. You can really get in there and clean some stuff up. All of this is to say that I believe in you. I believe that you can make beautiful looking models, just a little bit of work, some dry brushing, some washes, some line highlights, which we will get to line highlights, and we will get to this guy on the top. I wanted to finish up the wolf just to kind of help lock that all in. Alright, our final step is to do his little nose. Now, I think having his nose be black would make the most sense for him. So we're going to go ahead and shake this real quick. I'm going to turn the sound. And we're back. Alright. We'll take our little dollop of black. Just going to put it right here. Clean off my paint pot, because apparently I've shaken them too vigorously and that's wetted the tip. Put this back away. Actually, I'm really actually very impressed with the starter brush. It's a pretty good size for doing detail things. I wouldn't want to try and do a whole model with this one, just because it's nice to have somewhat larger brushes to be able to get like the fur. Like I wouldn't have wanted to try and do this guy's fur with this brush, but for some of this detail work, it's very good. All right, and then darken up this little nose. I found with stuff like this that have kind of interesting details and sort of shape to them, if you, as you're painting, sort of follow the shape of the nose or the thing that you're working on, starting in sort of the center of it, and then do progressively wider strokes, you're less likely to sort of go out of the lines, so to speak, because you're letting the sort of shape of the nose dictate the direction of your brush. See, that's such a nice little... Now we've really made his face a very interesting thing to look at. You've got the black of the nose, the pink of the ears. We'll have some yellow in his eyes in a moment. You really have a very dynamic face to look at, which is very nice. We use a lot of those same details on the rider, but you know, like I said, we'll start big to make yourself a little bit more comfortable with what you're working on, and then you can move smaller as you go. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and do those eyes just real fast. Now with the eyes, eyes are one of the things that I will do very rarely, and as you'll see on the rider, I'm probably not going to do his eyes, I'll just be honest with you now. However, with the wolf's eyes being as big as they are, they're such a interesting focal point. We're gonna unfortunately have to dive in and do a little eye. We're gonna come back to our yellow later for his pants, but for now we're just gonna do a little dollop. But this yellow spot we'll be returning to. And again, grab a little bit of your paint, because especially here where you're doing these very detailed things, you don't want the paint to be chunky and thick. as much of a pain as it is to get sort of 2 coats on the eyes, it's much better to get 2 thin coats on the eyes as opposed to 1 glob. Now, the reason that I went ahead and put a couple coats of that white on before is, like I said, if I were to just start putting this yellow on his fur in places, it would mostly just still look like fur, but with a slight yellow tint. I'd rather have his eyes have a yellow look to them on this sort of lighter color. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Ooh, I'll be honest, their eyes are still, after many years of painting, eyes are still one of those ones that'll get me. So now, we're getting to the detailed techniques here. What I like to do is, if you connect your hands in some way, it helps you kind of know where things are. You can really feel that sort of distance. You can even put your, if you're not worried about rubbing your paint, metal models are the worst to work with. You can even put your thumb onto his face. And then we're going to come in, we're going to just put a little yellow right in there. Oh, look at that. What's nice is, again, because I already did that white, I don't need to really go too crazy with the yellow. Just a little yellow, and that will bring out the color of our light color that we've put in there. Oh, and look at that. He's got a face. But we've lost some details in his teeth, so let's go ahead and go back to our wash. Let's bring those details back out. I love the wash step. It's always my favorite because as you're painting, you're watching some of the details go away, and that might be because your paint is too thick, and in which case, please thin your paints. But it also might just be by virtue of how the paints are sort of interacting with your model. But as soon as you start putting that wash back on, ooh, the colors pop right back out, which is just so delightful to see. All right, a little bit of wash on the old palette, because again, we're not going too crazy. We're just hitting the spikes. We're hitting the teeth, and that'll sort of finish up our wolf. So we're gonna come in. We're going back to our monster brush. It's 4 monsters, because it can really hold a good bit of paint. You know what? Take it back. We're doing high details. And you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to get your brush, get your paint on your brush, and then look at it and think to yourself, nope, this is not the one I want. So we're gonna go to our regiment brush. You don't always have to use the big one to apply washes, and especially with the detail we're wanting to get from these teeth, let's go ahead and get a slightly smaller brush so we can really control where that wash is going. So we've got our brush loaded with wash, and then just sort of drag it along those teeth. Ah, the teeth are already coming back. And as we were talking about before, you can do that kind of side pull to really make sure that you get the wash out of the brush and onto the teeth. Oh, I gotta stop. Oh, and the teeth have come back. And I might come back through and do a little bit of a highlight just to really make those teeth pop. But again, you got that sort of grimy looking teeth. And again, those spikes, they're too white. They're too not bone-like enough. Oh yeah. Now we've dirtied up the spikes a little. They look more like bone growths rather than sort of, very stark white, just poking out of his back. Now we might have been able to just put the wash onto the spikes without having to put that sort of base color on there, but I like controlling the base color. Also, we've gotten some brown on there, so this is just gonna give us a little bit more control of the color that we're looking at. Also, we only want a sort of a thin coat of this wash on here, so go ahead and just sort of move it around a little bit, kind of thin it out. So from the base there, you want it nice and dark. And we're even going to go ahead and put a little bit of wash in those ears. Kind of dull down the pink a little so they're not so pink. There we go. That's looking good. Now, I did notice, and I mentioned this. I don't like that we've lost some of the very brightness of the teeth. I'm gonna bring the brightness of the teeth up just a little bit. And luckily, since we're not doing a particularly thick wash, we can really sort of get in there and relatively soon after because we're not using a lot of wash, we can get back in there and do some highlighting without having a lot of time for the wash to dry. Mostly because it's it's already dried at this point because it's kind of thinner. I need to add a little bit more water to my lighter color here. But now let's go in, and we're just going to hit the sort of teeth of interest. We got this one here. Really going to lighten that tooth up. I really want to see it. And the other canine tooth. I'm sorry. I'd see myself out, but I'm already here. So we've got that canine there. We're going to go ahead and grab these sort of front teeth. Really sort of emphasizes those spikes. And what I'm doing here is I'm just using the side of my brush because the point sometimes when you push on it, because depth perception is hard to control, you might accidentally get a little extra on there like I did there. Whereas if you're going for the side, you're going to mostly just hit that very upraised section. And yeah, we got some white spots, but that's okay. We'll come back to them. We'll clean those up. In fact, let's do that now because we're still waiting for the thing to dry on the top. See, that's why we still got this brown here. And this is actually honestly why I kind of like working with a wet palette, because your paints will stay on there longer. I don't necessarily come back like the next day for my paints, but it'll make sure that they stay wet your entire paint session. So see, we've cleaned that up very nicely. And it's like you wouldn't know that I slapped our cream colored paint on his jaw. Now, again, so let's see, and we've dove into, and I didn't mention this specifically, and I should have. What we've dove into now is what's called highlighting. It's sometimes you can do sort of line highlights, but for this guy, we're just going to add a little bit of sort of lighter color to the tips again to really emphasize that nice sort of bone look to them, to help them just look a little pop a little bit more. So we're gonna reload our cream color, and we're just gonna put it on the tips, just a little bit there. There you go. And I don't want the line between the washed part and the unwashed part to be too stark. So I'll go in with my clean brush. I'm just going to sort of grab the paint that's on there and sort of pull it down to try to blend that line, because you don't want those sort of stark lines on your bone parts. So if you notice here, creamy, not creamy. We're going to go and we're just going to try and just pull the paint down a little bit with it. And this is there was no paint on my brush. I'm just using the undried paint that's on there to try and kind of blend that line in a little bit. And there we go. This wolf has been getting a lot of attention, and our rider has gotten almost none at all. But that's okay. He will get got. Ooh. I've already spent 45 minutes on this here wolf. We spent a lot of time on the wolf, but I feel like it's also because I was trying to make sure you guys kind of knew what was going on. Normally, if you were to do this wolf following these steps, it will not take you 45 minutes to paint the wolf. So let's go ahead and start diving into the rider. Now, for the rider, what I'm gonna end up doing with him is starting my base layers from the sort of bottommost part and moving my way up. This is because as I'm working on the saddle, there's a chance I can hit the pants, and as I'm working on the pants, there's a chance I can hit sort of the belt and things. And as I work on the armor, it's going to be really hard to avoid these. Where if I start on the thing that's sort of the lowest and move my way up, then it's going to be a lot easier to control sort of what my paint is doing. So, the first thing we're going to do is start onto the leather of the saddle. Now, I've been using my brown leather paint for most of the work so far that I've done. Now, if I were to make this saddle the same color as the wolf, the two things would blend into each other a lot, and that would sort of lose the visual interest in it. So, we've only got the brown, but that's okay. That's where we're going to start. So we're going to go ahead and make a new spot for our brown. This is going to be our leather that we're doing. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to make it look like I like a nice sort of kind of almost cherry leather, or like a purpley kind of leather color. So what we're going to do is fix the lid of my red. I'm going to shake the red vigorously. Make sure it's well mixed. And then we're going to put just a little dollop of red into our brown to try and make sort of an interesting leather color. Now, less is more because you can't take paint out, so I'm going to start with just this tiny little drop. We're going to start mixing it up and kind of see what color we can get with this. And again, I'm going to use the back of my brush because I don't want to oversaturate my my bristles. Oh, look at that. And that's exactly what I was looking for. And I thought I might need more red. I didn't. So I'm really glad I just started with that little dollop. But this brown now has a very interesting color to it. It has a very fun color to it. It actually kind of reminds me a lot of this wood color here. There's a lot of similarities to it. And I like how that looks. It's going to be a nice brown that's going to be different enough to the other brown that it won't look too similar, which is again nice. It's that you want to put colors that have a good sort of difference next to them so that you can tell that they're two different things, because ultimately what color you paint things will inform people as to what material it's made out of. So if I were to paint this a sort of a blue or a more of a fabric color, then it would look like fabric. So I have an example of a horse that I did. Oh, where is it? Oh no! Oh, here he is. So here is the horse with a horse blanket, and you've got that nice sort of red leather look. But if I had done the blanket that it had on its back, if I had done that more as a leather color, it would look like he just simply had a leather blanket with a leather saddle on it, but you also would have started losing sort of the detail of the saddle because the colors are too similar. It's kind of like that fun illusionary effect where the floor and the stairs are the same thing. So as you're trying to go down, you find yourself falling down the stairs because you can't tell the difference between the stairs and the floor itself. We've gotten off subject just a little bit, but that's okay. We're talking color theory. Remember to put a little bit of water into your paint to help thin it out. Use your palette to test to see how the paint's going to go on your model. Spin the brush to point it, and then we're going to start applying. So as we begin, there's still a lot of similarities to the color underneath it, but once we start giving it a wash and our line details, that'll really help distinguish the differences between the two. And again, we don't want any of that sort of original white to be present, so really got to get in there in the nooks and crannies to make sure you're getting that full coverage. And that's why I've definitely talked to other painters who prefer to use a slightly darker primer, so that you can essentially use it as a shadow. So if you don't necessarily get every nook and cranny, you know, at least it doesn't have this sort of white glowing spot to it. And again, we're using the sort of the contours of the plastic, the modeling itself, to help inform where our brush should be going. And again, that's why we're starting at the sort of our low point, and then we're going to move our way up. Because now that we've brought this leather color all the way up to the pants, we can basically bring the pants color down to the leather, and we shouldn't have any white on it, which is nice. Just remember to take your time. We've still got that brown in case we get some on there. We can clean that up. But do your cleanups all at once, because you know you don't want to be constantly changing out the paint on your brush. I like when a well sort of modeled miniature starts getting the colors on it. You start being able to much more easily see the different parts. It's kind of like this wolf's face. Like, he has so much delightful detail on that face that you can really see now that we're starting to get that paint on it. And hopefully we don't get too much of a glare. I haven't been watching my monitor as much as I ought to have. I get so engrossed in the painting itself that I forget sometimes that you know, I'm trying to help you guys out, and that you can't see what I see. Yeah. Remember, you want to make sure your paint isn't getting too thick. If you feel your brush not cooperating with you, just clean it off. Restart, reset. Make sure you got that nice sharp point. Make sure that the brush is nice and cleaned off, that the inner part of your bristles is clean, and then you can just go back and control how much paint you've got on your brush. Because you don't want to do too much. Oh, sorry. Try to not sniff in your ear. And what I've found a lot of times when I'm painting is that once I start putting color on the model, I start realizing where the color shouldn't be. So for instance, now that I'm getting the leather color onto this saddle, what I've noticed is there's some buckles here, and those are going to be interesting because obviously buckles, for the most part, aren't made out of leather. Generally made of metal. So when we get to our metal step, we're going to want to make sure that we bring out those details, and they'll be easier to see once again we wash this part, because that'll help bring out those details again. And so now that we're back to the part that we started on, we can kind of see the places where the white is starting to show through. And again, that's fine. And in fact, we kind of want our paints to be thin enough that we can kind of see the colors underneath, because much like with the eyes, those colors underneath can be very good to help inform your color scheme. You can make really interesting decisions and really interesting things happen if you play around with what colors you're using, which I very much enjoy. And that's the fun thing. The more you do it, the more you'll sort of discover what colors you like to work with, how they interact with each other. Yellow, for instance, has a hard time covering darker colors. And that's just something you'll sort of learn over time. You'll become more comfortable with how much water you should put in your paints, whether or not you like a wet palette or a dry palette. These are all things that you'll learn just the more you do it. As with most things, you know, practice is where you'll learn. And I'm working on stuff that's speaking of practice, eventually I'll get to the point where I'm practiced enough to be able to show you the parts of the model that I'm painting. So there we go. We've got ourselves a nice layer of leather. I'm liking how that's looking. That's looking good. Now, we're getting low on time, but I think we can get another color on this guy before before we're out for today. Now I mentioned, so we've got a relatively limited amount of colors to work with, but that's okay. I like this sort of the options that we have here. We don't get stuck with analysis paralysis. We can really focus on what do we have, what can we do with it. So I was thinking about I want to do his banner red. I want the banner to be big and red. So that leaves me with a couple other colors. We've got black and white, but those are relatively monochrome, so I'm going to go ahead and stay away from those for his clothes. We've used a lot of brown so far for his leathers and his wolf, so we're going to stay away from those as well. So he's got the pants, and then it's kind of a thing you can kind of see on the back there. He has a little bit of a shirt poking out from underneath his armor, like a tunic or a tabard kind of a thing. Probably be a tunic. So I was thinking to myself, well, how do I do for my colors? So I've really got, the green is going to be his skin. So we've got the face, his hands, and a little bit is peeking out on his biceps there. So I was like, that leaves us with essentially yellow and blue. So I thought to myself, ooh, I could do a little bit of yellow poking out from the thing here, and then I'll do blue on the pants. But then I realized that would mean he's wearing blue jeans. So ultimately, the color decisions that we're going to do is his pants will be yellow, his tunic that's sticking out is going to be blue, his banner will be red, his armor will be metallic, and then of course his skin will be green, because we do have an orc riding this guy. Yeah, we've got a couple minutes. Let's go ahead and dive into the yellow. And I feel I should mention, he does have leather straps that wrap around his ankles. Now, I could do the leather straps now, but what I'd like to do is get the yellow down first, and then once I've done that, then I can put the straps down, because covering brown with yellow is much harder than covering yellow with brown. So if I cover the whole leg with that with the yellow, I can then pull out the detail of the leather straps much more easily. So let's go ahead and dive into that real fast, and that'll probably be our last thing we do today as we continue this paint job. It's taken a bit of time, but at the same time, this is a much larger model. If we were, say, working on just the wolf, we'd already be done. We'd have been done at the beginning of this episode. But because this is a slightly larger project, it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort. But in the end, you've got yourself. Imagine you're the players, and they're fighting some orcs, and then this guy rolls into the battle. Like, this is a hero character. This is someone that they can really sink their teeth into. Make sure to give him enough hit points, though, because you don't want the boss fight to be done before you know it. I mean, you might. Who knows? I've run into that problem. Anyway, so we're going to grab, we have our yellow in our palette that you can just barely see. We've got a little bit of water on our brush to make sure that we don't fill up the top of the bristles. We're going to thin that yellow a little bit. Now the yellow we don't want to be too thin because, it's already sort of a thin paint as it is. Tighten up that bristles, and then we're just going to start putting that yellow on there. Now you may have also noticed he's got some really cool metal knee pads. I've also noticed these, and they will be getting metaled when we go through our metalling process. Oh, goodness. And again, this comes back to the thing we can really start to see the lines, the differences between the different materials once you start putting the paint on. And again, that red's the blue is gonna be able to cover up this yellow. So if I get a little on there, that's gonna be okay. And I'm just gonna cover his whole leg for right now in this yellow, because I can definitely cover it up with the leather when I get to it. Oh, and I went and got some on the saddle, but again, that's okay. Gotta make sure I'm putting it at the right angle so you guys can actually see what I'm working on. Now we've got the fabric started. We're gonna have to do a couple coats because yellow is a thin paint. Nope. Finding the lines here is always interesting. Go ahead, do that there. And I think this leg is a great example of it. There's some spots where the idea of the detail is there, but the execution may have gotten a little sort of muddled through, you know, getting primed. But we'll bring those details out with our leather straps. And again, if this is something that you've found to be helpful, that you find interesting, that you want to see more of, please, you know, go ahead and share this. Send somebody a link of this painting if you have a friend or a relative that says to themselves, "I'd love to get started in painting, but I don't know where to begin." Send them our way, you know. So what we're trying to do is help people kind of find their starting spot. And my hope is that everyone can sort of find the fun in painting miniatures, the joy of painting. And I know I'm going very Bob Ross on this, but I think he was onto something, you know. There's something very sort of calming about getting your models done, and sure, there's some detail spots that are sort of hard to get to that can be a little frustrating, but it's an obstacle that you can overcome. And it's a very finite obstacle. It's a very sort of quantifiable obstacle. In a world of strange, sort of unknowable things, this model has a beginning and an end. And you can conquer that. I believe in you. Or you don't even think of this as your enemy. This is something that you're trying to help sort of bring to life. You're bringing out the details. You're bringing out the imperfections. I found that I have a handful of models that have sort of interesting oddities and foibles on them, and I found that the players find those sort of oddities and foibles to be the thing that they'll sort of see, and they'll find interesting. Like, oh, the guy with the, you know, the this or the other thing, or the gal with the yellow pants. And to you might see those the mistakes, but at the same time, your players won't know exactly what you were trying to do. They'll only see what you did do, which should encourage you. You know, they'll see the best in your work, because, you know, they're predisposed to. You'll always have a hard time not seeing I missed that detail here and this detail there. That's because, again, you're less than a foot away with this model on your face. It won't be that close to you on the table. It'll be much farther away. As long as it reads from a bit farther away, then that's really what you're looking for. I'm sorry I didn't end up going with dad jeans on him. I'm glad that I took a sec to think about it for a bit, because I realized I was like, oh, I'm just gonna think about what colors I want to do for the paints, where I want to go with it, and then realized that could have gone pear-shaped very quickly. And again, as you can see, I got a lot of extra yellow here and there. That's okay. I'll get that cleaned up. But that will have to be what we end up doing on our next painting session. For now, we're going to go ahead and leave him here. We got the wolf done. I'm very happy with the wolf. He's got his spikes. He's got his face. He's been dry brushed. He's been washed. And when we return next week, we will finish this guy up, probably. We're going to be putting metal all over his armor. We're going to be having a lot of fun with. I love doing metal. I'm going to be doing the metal on his chest, getting all this done. I might slap a coat of metal and then wash it off camera, just because the washing does take a long time to dry, so I'd rather have that done so I can show you what we're doing. And you don't really need to see the process of going through and doing the metallic paints. They go on much like every other paint, so I might do that off camera just so you don't have to wait for the dry brush to dry. But then there's a lot of stuff for us to do, so we'll have to see between now and then. But until then, wait, we're gonna go ahead and do this and this. Hey, I'm back. I just want to say thank you for joining me for this delightful painting experience. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments of the Facebook video. Like I said, share with. Oh, I'm touching my table. Share with people. I hope the color was a little bit better today. I have in the description the links to the models and the paints that I was using. So go ahead and go check that out, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.